4 fawns. We were the first humans seen by those 3 on the dirt road near Crane's Beach. More innocent than tame, they mistook us, holding hands, for something 4-legged like them, and allowed us to walk close. We reached nearer, near their wilderness. They did not stir until one bounded off, half leaf, half bird, and the others followed, disappeared into the trees, and we became 2 bipeds instead of 1 deer.
Members of the dear Hovanessian family, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bob Mirak. I'm president of the Armenian Cultural Foundation, and I welcome you today to the celebration of the life and art of Diana der Hovanessian. Diana was a special person for so many of us, and I'm sure for many of you. And I'm sure our program will illustrate how special she was. An event like today's is the work of many hands. I should like, first of all, to thank the 9 Armenian organizations which, as co-sponsors, came together in an unprecedented manner to produce today's program. Indeed, except for genocide commemorations, such collaboration is rare and is to be applauded. So thank you to the organizations. Beyond their efforts, I want to acknowledge the New England Poetry Club and their officers, Mary Buchinger and Hilary Salek, who with the Cultural Foundation were the co-organizers of today's event. Without their help, it's clear this event would not have taken place. So again, thank you to the New England Poetry Club. Finally, and most crucial to the program, was the role of our curator, Dr. Arakelians. Honoring Diana was Ara's brainchild in the first place. He put together the efforts of the 9 organizations, he structured the presentations, and he developed the impressive program book. And thanks again to Ara. The Armenian Cultural Foundation was established in 1945 in Boston by Vahan Topalyan, an immigrant from Turkish Armenia. His portrait is there to my right, who with benefactors amassed a wonderful collection of world literature, usually in first editions. He also put together the finest collection of Armenian newspapers in the New World. And the Tiffany lamps that you see here, the oriental rugs, the objet d'art, are all items that he gathered in his lifetime. Now, in the 1960s, some 25 years after its founding, the foundation, with the indispensable help of my father, John Mirak, whose portrait, unfortunately, is covered up. But that's probably one of the few times in its lifetime that something was covered up. In the 60s, he purchased this building. The Cultural Foundation had been taken over by the state of Massachusetts through eminent domain. And so Vahan Topalyan came to my father and said, "Mr. Mirak, we have some problems. Can you help us finding a place?" And my father, who was an automobile dealer and didn't know too much about books, turned Topalyan down. And he said, "You know, Mr. Topalyan, I don't know anything about books." And Topalyan said, "You don't have to know anything about books to run the Cultural Foundation." So he said, "What do you want from me?" And he said to my father, "I want you to become president of the Armenian Cultural Foundation." My father, in his deposition, said, "Look, I've got 4 children. I'm running a business. We're doing some apartments, etc. I'll let you know, but I don't think so. And that night he went home to my mother, and the two of them decided that they would not accept Mr. Topalian's offer. So he was prepared to say, sorry, thank you, when 2 days later he got a phone call from Topalian's lawyer saying, Mr. Mirak, you've been unanimously elected president of the Armenian Cultural Foundation. So from that period on, he and Topalian worked together. They purchased this building. There was a porch at the back of it. That was ripped off, and they added this great room to show off the magnificent holdings. Now, the mission of the Cultural Foundation from its outset was to advance culture in general and Armenian culture in particular. And in 2002, the Foundation's mission was expanded to promote the role of women in Armenian history. Now, as our speakers will note, Diana's career ably fulfills that triple mandate for Armenians, for Armenian women, and for the larger culture. For Armenians, her hundreds of poems and translations dealt with separation, historic exile, genocide, and new birth. For the wider audience, in first-rate journals like the New York Times and The Nation, she introduced non-Armenians to themes of awakening, of love and pain that transcended ethnic boundaries. And as a woman, she achieved an equal place with modern Armenian literary giants like the males Daniel Varajan Siamanto, the female Zabel Yasayan, as well as the great writers William Soroyan and Peter Balakian. She certainly rates among them. I was saying, on a personal note, in addition to those roles that she had played for us, she helped us whenever she was asked. On one occasion, she translated Gurung, the classic poem of the Armenian exile, for a book that I had written. Also, whenever we asked her for advice, on numerous occasions, whether we had to publish a certain poet or not, we would turn to her for advice. And her judgments were first rate. But she would always turn down, whenever she turned down somebody, it was always in a gentle manner, which was her hallmark. And for her accomplishments as poet, translator, and person of letters in 1999, just about 20 years ago, we honored her in this very room, which was the very first time an Armenian-American organization had so recognized her. Today, in view of her accomplishments and genius, we are again honored to be the venue and co-organizer of this celebration of her art and her life. We are pleased that you are joining us today. I should like to turn now the podium over to our speakers. To follow them, please turn to page 8 of the program book, which outlines the series of speakers and presentations. I have also suggested, if the speakers wish, that the speakers tell us why have they chosen their readings. So with that, let us turn now to our celebration. Oh, I might just caution, there's a step here involved. And I'm saying that for my sake as well.
Salt. Salt was originally published in the Agni Review in 1989 and subsequently appears as one of the key poems in Diana's 1990 book, Songs of Bread, Songs of Salt. I always found both the language and the message of the poem to be powerful, and I enjoy the sound of the various Armenian place names that are in the poem and which I will probably pronounce very poorly. I also discovered this morning only that the poem is slightly different in its original publication in the Agni Review than in the book, but I will be reading the version that was published in the book. Salt. 1. It was unnecessary long ago to perspire, and salt had not been discovered. It took medieval pain and pressure, the worry over fate and free will, to make men sweat. Then salt crystallized, and those who discovered it lived in an Armenian village called Kop. Since that day, the Greeks in books of alchemy labeled salt sal armenicum, in deference to the origins of alum, malachite, and lazulite. Along the river Vardamark, along the Araks and Achurian, through the Valley Achto, traders came by ox cart and caravan, along Salt Road to the mines of Nakhchivan, Kakhsvan, from the west until the railroad's time. From the east, another horde decided there might be a better way to speed the supply by making the Armenians weep and weep. 2. But do not think salt came from Armenia only because of sadness. Tears come from laughing too. Salt remains when the sea recedes, when the flood subsides. It is what is left when passion is eased to coat the face of calm. The same salt that flavors the table sweetens the breath, causes the blood to rise, spoils the pilaf, and brightens the smile. Salt that eats the heart can erode the sun. When you throw it over your left shoulder to blind the eye of bad luck, invite good luck to your table and say with the Armenian poets, "Hey, John, let us toast one another, the dispersed. But don't let the salt of longing close our throats with thirst. Hey, John, our differences, like salt, flavor what we eat, but let us not consume more salt than meat."
Diana der Hovanessian was president of the New England Poetry Club for nearly 4 decades. She'd been asked by the previous president, Victor Howes, to be secretary, and she replied, "I don't do shorthand." In her time as president of this historic club, which was founded in 1915 by Robert Frost, Amy Lowell, and Conrad Aiken, Diana led with a broad vision. She invited international poets and offered them a stage, helping to create an audience for their work. And she founded a poetry prize for translations. Another New England poet, Longfellow, also translated poetry and brought poets from around the world to Massachusetts. And one day, Diana was walking by Longfellow's house, a National Historic Site in Cambridge, and she had the idea to bring poetry to the old poet's house. And thus began one of the longest running poetry reading series in the country, where the Golden Rose, recognition for lifetime achievement, is awarded by the New England Poetry Club. In Diana's time as president, winners have included 3 Nobel laureates and several Pulitzer Prize recipients. Finally, it simply would be wrong to speak of Diana's presidency of the club without mentioning her hospitality, which was renowned. These last few months, I've had the honor of gathering recollections and anecdotes for the Festschrift in her honor from all those who knew Diana. And please do consider sending me something if you haven't already. So many of the tributes that I've received thus far describe the elegant table she generously set with aromatic Armenian dishes, her house filled with books and art. In accordance with her wishes, Diana, our Golden Rose, remained co-president of the New England Poetry Club until her passing. Her stamp on this institution will be everlasting. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. It's indeed appropriate that we should be here. to honor someone who honored us with her words. Speaking of her hospitality, when I first came here from Chicago almost 20 years ago, she was one of the first poets who I had the chance to meet, and she was extraordinarily open and hospitable, and I so appreciated that. The poems that I've chosen are from Diana's volume of poems, The Second Question. The Second Question. And I love this volume because it reminds us, I think, that poetry is ultimately, in spite of all the statements we make, it's ultimately about, that poetry itself is ultimately about questioning. It's about sending up a flare and seeing who sees that. It's about opening us up and asking, are you feeling, are you understanding what it is? Why don't we, are you feeling, are you understanding what I am trying to get across to you, because I hope you're trying to get the same thing across to me. And if we're both asking the same questions, perhaps we become a little less aware of our own loneliness, right? These poems for me are both in the voice of a wise woman looking back at the past and realizing how it resonates within her still. They are little documents connecting human to human, human to culture, and human ultimately back to the self, which is a repository of both. What I've always found in Diana, and I expect and suspect that we all have as well, which is a mixture of intelligence and a sobering grace. To that brat, my poor father, with a child like me who could never sit still, who talked back, who at 16 thought she was an expert, telling him most Armenian poems are too sentimental or bloody. Poor father, whose youth was spent fighting to avenge the murder of Armenian poets, among others, who went to college in his 20s, wrote poetry in 3 languages, read them in 6, listening to a brat telling him what a poem should do, and letting her. I personally connected with that poem because when I was 16, I was filled with both an ignorance and an arrogance that pains me to even recall. I had a teacher who said to me, "May you live long enough to realize the fool you've been." Regretfully, both his curse and his blessing came true. This last poem is a brief persona piece. It devastated me, especially when looked at through the lens of the Armenian genocide, and that given Diana's grandfather, upon hearing that she wanted to be a poet, said to her, "Armenia has too many poets. What we need are journalists." I think you will agree that through poems like these and Diana's tireless translations of forgotten Armenian poets, she found a way to do both magnificently. This is called Lot's Wife, not Love's Wife. Lot's Wife. Of course I look back. It was my job to record, to report. And if I hardened into a pillar of salt, it was my role to hold up the past, as pillars do. They also turned to salt who did not turn to look. They turned to salt that flowed and blew away like sand. They also turned. There was no either, or, and.
I'm Vivian Shipley. I've come from Connecticut to celebrate Diana. We've known each other, I guess, over 40 years. We're introduced by a mutual friend, Leo Connellan, who was the second poet laureate of Connecticut, and quite a character. I've stayed in Diana's house on the upstairs on numerous occasions. She would never let men stay upstairs, so I was lucky I was a woman. Diana didn't like to call attention to herself, but she made such a difference wherever she was. For me, Diana epitomized modesty, selflessness, and generosity. She wanted to give, and it was very difficult to persuade her to ever take anything or be treated to a dinner, as Krieger back there can probably tell you. She always insisted on cooking, and she made very elaborate meals prior to any of the New England Poetry Club events. It was as if they appeared by magic, and then she would just walk out the door to host a reading. I know that no genie appeared to clean up. It was always Diana. Her laugh, her bangs, her impish, wicked sense of humor, and her Armenian feast. But most of all, my love for her are what will continue to inspire and guide me. I've chosen poems that sort of, for me, represent the things that I remember about Diana. One is the food. This is called Thanksgiving. Diana understood that food is not just food, but food is love. And it's a way that she showed her love for people, her concern for people, her caring for people. Thanksgiving. There's a quote that begins with Edna St. Vincent Millay. Love is not all, it is not food nor drink. Nor is food love, but palate sport alone, even with ceremony, without toast or vow. It is just means of keeping flesh on bone. But table and altar are confused somehow. We substitute our food again, for rites of love. Look how this buffet sinks with golden fowl and platters of grain and candles for our eyes to drink. Love is not food, but in the name of those with parched throats who could not eat or pray, whose empty mouths have closed, whose bellies swelled with pain not meat. We call it sustenance when it is shared, and sharing we call prayer. And I know if Diana were with us today, she would be saying prayers for all the children that are starving in Yemen. We see their pictures over and over. They are unbelievable. And so Diana always lifted a voice for those, like those who are now starving in our world. Not just for Armenians, but for all the people in the world who have suffered and been persecuted. Now, on a lighter note, Diane and I share something, which is we both love Porsches. Now, you couldn't tell it by looking at me now, but in 1974, when I went down to Vanderbilt to graduate with my PhD, such a hot shot then, there was a yellow Porsche Targa rotating in the showroom. So I walked into the guy and I said, I think I'd like to buy that car. And he said, lady, you think you can drive it? I said, I'm going to learn. And so you won't believe this now, but I never redlined it, but I have gone 160 a couple of times. And Diane and I shared a love for speed and fast cars. And so many things you might not know about Diana is that she was kind of a wicked woman. She had quite an impish side to her, a devil. Devil in the blue dress, if any of you are old enough to remember that. But at any rate, this is called How I Entered Poetry. I saw it shining in the snow outside the used car display store and asked the salesman what it was. It's a Porsche poem, he said. What's more, it's not for you. Too much power. It goes too fast and uses very little gas. I'll take it. It's my car, I said, placing a down payment down and fled. Driving when other cars passed by, I'd laugh, knowing if I choose, I fly. I'd like to end with a poem that is going to be sung at the end of the program, but I think epitomizes Diana's undying love for Armenia and all that it represents for all of us that we need to keep remembering in our world. I'd like to believe that the lanyard by Billy Collins, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that poem, was inspired by this. The cadence of Billy's poem is very, very similar to this one. And so I do believe that he was inspired with the rhythm in his poem by the one that Diana had created. It's called Shifting the Sun. When your father dies, say the Irish, you lose your umbrella against bad weather. May his son be your light, say the Armenians. When your father dies, say the Welsh, you sink a foot deeper into the earth. May you inherit his light, say the Armenians. When your father dies, say the Canadians, you run out of excuses. May you inherit his son, say the Armenians. When your father dies, say the Indians, he comes back as the thunder. May you inherit his light, say the Armenians. When your father dies, say the Russians, he takes your childhood with him. May you inherit his light, say the Armenians. When your father dies, say the British, you join his club. You vowed you wouldn't. May you inherit his son, say the Armenians. When your father dies, say the Armenians, your son shifts forever and you walk in his light. And today we are all walking in the sunshine, in the light of Diana's smile, of her words, of what she's inspired us all to be with her generosity of spirit. Thank you.
Hello. During her many visits to Armenia, Diana established very close ties with Armenian poets, cultural figures, writers, and eventually some of them undertook the translation, the work of translating her her poems to Armenian. In result of that, 3 volumes of Diana's poetry have been published in Armenian. They were published in Yerevan, Armenia. 2 of the covers are behind me, you can see them. I have selected 4 pieces to recite for you tonight. In the first 2, Diana writes about her Armenian identity. In the first poem, she writes that her Armenian voice and identity is hidden behind what you see projected on the outside. The second one is about Diana's message to a non-Armenian boy. She asks him, how could he possibly understand Armenians if he doesn't understand the language, the history, and their suffering? Իմ աչքի խորքում կա ուրիշ մի աչք, որ դուրս է նայում եւ խորասուզվում քո աչքի խորքում։ Իմ ձայնի ներսում, որ բարբարում է արածիկական ու մեղմախոս բարեր, կա ուրիշ մի ձայն, որ Հայաստան է ճչում ու կանչում։ Իմ երգի ներսում կա ուրիշ մի երգ, որի բարերը ես չեմ սովորել երբևէ կյանքում, սակայն երգում եմ, սակայն երգել եմ այդ երգը, բխած ի խորոց սրտի, որ չի ավարտվում։ Ինչպես կարող ես հասկանալ նրա ժպիտն ու նինջը, եթե չգիտես ու չես հասկանում օրորոցային մեր հին երգերը։ Ինչպես կարող ես հասկանալ նրա աչքերը տրտում, եթե չես լսել դու Վանի մասին։ Ինչի հետ պիտի բաղդատես նրա աչքերը, ասա, եթե չես չափել դու Կիլիկիայի կապույտները ձույլ։ Դու ինչպես պիտի հասկանաս նրա խաղաղությունը, եթե չես լսել այն ծեր հայ կանանց ողբն ու հարաճը, երբ լուր են նրանք։ Ասա, ինչ գիտես այն գծի մասին, որ բաժանում են իրա ծիծաղն ու արցունքները, եթե չգիտես,
թե հերուների երազի միջից Արարատ լերը ինչպես է ցոլում, երբ Երևանում պայծառ է օրը։ Ինչպես հասկանաս տրոփը սրտի, եթե չես լսել դու հայդուկային մեր հին երգերի տրոփը ըմբոստ։ Ինչպես հասկանաս դու սերը նրա, խորհուրդը սիրո, երբ կարոտ բարը քո լեզվում չկա, չկա աշխարհի եւ ոչ մի լեզվում։ Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here with you this afternoon, a delight to be in Diana's presence again, and she is so very palpable in this room. Also, well, how thrilling to see so many writers honored on these walls. Let there be holy peace in all lands of the East. Let kindness flow and bless all lands in the West. Let the flow and flood be stopped of sweat and blood, and let only calm and love be shed from stars above. So wrote Daniel Varujan in Diana der Hovanessian's limpid translation. The names one heard from poets coming of age in Boston in the last quarter of the 20th century were those of Robert Lowell, Elizabeth Bishop, Daniel Varujan, Charles Olson, Egisha Charance, John Wieners, and of course, Siamanto. We were all aware of the heroic generation of Armenian modernists martyred by the genocidal repression led by Sultan Abdul Hamid and the Young Turks. Their tragic deaths led us to reflect on the importance of poetry in a time of crisis. We knew their poems and stories largely thanks to the genius of one person, a Cantabrigian by the name of Diana der Hovanessian. The verb to translate means to carry across, to carry over. In literature, translation is an attempt to recreate the style and values of one culture in that of another, often very different society. It's a kind of transfusion of energies from one language to another, reinvigorating the host culture. The importance of literary translation can't be overstated. The poets who matter, who we remember, are the ones who themselves respected the power of memory. Diana, utterly of her time, carried another time, indeed, another world inside her. It was a world translated from the experiences of her ancestors, and she wrote about it repeatedly in her own poems. For instance, in a poem titled simply Translating, Diana wrote, I would run to escape your blood-filled poems which my father would recite. I would dodge the ash and smoke that hid in your songs, Siamanto. And who will bring one handful of that sacred ash to bury with my exiled bones? I ran from tattooed skin that bore the blue cross, ran from numbers on the wrists. I did not want to know the poetry of wrongs. And when my father died and strangers came to say your lines, a stranger sprinkled sacred ash, men who had heard the words I would not hear. And now I take your poems and pound them into a raw new language, using all the force of unshed tears. Alistair Reid, the great translator of Borges and Neruda, once wrote, translators require the self-effacing disposition of saints. And since a good translation is one in which a work appears to have been written and conceived in the language into which it is translated, good translators grow used to going unrewarded and unnoticed. Fortunately, that was not Diana's fate. While Diana lived around the corner from the childhood homes of both E. E. Cummings and Henry James, she proved a most democratic and welcoming steward of traditions local and international. Thanks to her, the New England Poetry Club was perhaps the most cosmopolitan literary circle in town. It was at her home that I met writers like Thomas Transtromer and Yves Bonnefoy, as well as Richard Eberhard and Lawrence Ferlinghetti. It was also where I met the poet Peter Balakian, who has assumed, among several mantles, that of literary ambassador for Armenia. A person of great warmth, loyalty, and commitment to poetry, Diana often hid behind a persona that made her appear both shy and slightly befuddled. But she had clearly taken James's counsel to heart. She was a person on whom nothing was lost. There were so many ways in which Diana was singular in the literary world. Among other things, she never uttered a mean word about anyone. For those of us with multiple literary identities, Diana's loyalty to her heritage was both moving and encouraging. Diana showed the way. She honored her roots while nurturing the contemporary literary scene, local and international, with passionate generosity, gentle humor, and an unwavering faith in the importance and power of poetry. We are all strengthened by her example even today. I'd like to close with Diana's homage to 3 of the poets she resurrected with her devotion and her translations. The poem is called 3 Poets. Varujan. The great Armenian epic, that was what I was working on. And when I would read segments to my students, their eyes would fill with the deep secret of their past. It was like owning a huge gem we alone knew about. I polished it in a secret room. When the Turks hauled me out in April to my death, they found the stone still rough and tossed it into the great fire. Siamanto. My greatest rhythms rolled out when I spoke, resurrecting my people's hopes. I told them to build muscle and break the ropes. And when I wrote, I heard Narek breathe in my poems. Narek set the pace. For centuries, our legacy. Yet so many children do not claim their inheritance, forbidden to learn their letters. Some wear his poems like talismans, waiting to learn. I praise the words that link us, stronger than blood. Tekayan. Older than one, the same age as the other. I outlived both only because I was in Jerusalem when the great crime came. Brothers, I write every day now, honing. I rewrite and reshape. Poems have become my wife and children. Editorials are my letters home, but to no address that I own. I write out the burden of having lived, the terrible burden of having survived. As my friend Peter Balakian instructed me to say, Hent Menang.
In the following 2 poems, Diana professes her love for Armenia, her homeland. The first one is about Mount Ararat. It's always going to belong to Armenians, Diana writes. Armenians consider Mount Ararat their symbol of Armenia. The second poem is a beautiful love letter to Armenia. Diana always felt that even when she lived far from Armenia, she was very close to it. And as she writes, only a dream separated her from her homeland. Երբ վերջին հայի խոսքը կլրի, երբ հայի արյան վերջին կաթիլը նույնիսկ ջուր խառնած չի հոսի սպառ, չի արթնացնի այլ ցեղակիցների սրտեր, երբ հայկական վերջին հուշը կմարի այս երկրագնդի վրա, երբ մեր պատմությունը
կդառնա սոսկ պատմություն, ոչ թե ապրելու դրդապատճառ, կդառնա զուտ դատական գործ, այն ժամանակ կարող են Արարատն անվանափոխել, բայց ինչ էլ որ լինի, Արարատը մերն է Արարատը։ Արևից հասած երկերի երկիր, հողմահարված քարերի երկիր, իմ երազների, իմ արյան համար և իմ գոյության պարտական եմ քեզ։ Իմ հոր աղոթքների երկիր, քո ինձ նվիրած երազների համար, իմ չարտասված արցունքների համար ես պարտական եմ քեզ։ Քո լեգենդների, քո ճշմարտության, դավթի հրաշալի հրեղեն ձիու, ոսկե արմատներ ունեցող հսկա ծառերի մասին մեծ մորս պատմած հրաշապատում հեքիաթների համար պարտական եմ քեզ։ Մղձավանջային իմ երազներում ես թաքնվեցի Եփրատի կարմիր արնահեղեղից։ Երազների մեջ իմ դժնատեսիլ հալածված փախա արնոց գետերից։ Քնից արթնացա ազատ մի երկրում, բայց օտար լեզվով, որ չէր կարող պահպանել երգերն այն, որ քարերն էին երգում։ Ես արթնացա որպես տարագրյալ երեխա, բայց ամեն գիշեր քեզ հետ եմ հայրենիք, ընդամենը մի երազ է մեզ բաժանում, իմ սիրո երգերի երկիր, կորուսյալ, գտյալ հայրենիք։
We've all heard that the prophet is without honor among his own kin. Might as well say the poet. Diana de Hovanessian was just mommy to my sister and me. Writing was just what mothers did. I once told her that my college roommate typed all night on her thesis. "Doesn't that keep you up?" she asked. "Are you kidding?" I said. That soothes me to sleep. That typewriter clatter means mommy is here. Well, her noisy typewriter morphed into the click of the computer keyboard, but now there's silence. Except for her poems. We still have her poems. Since I'm here because I'm her daughter, I decided to read some poems she wrote about my sister and me. This one is called At Twilight. The two syllables of their names ripple over the yard to pass unheard. Maro, Sona, come home. It is twilight, and the colors drained from pink dogwood and the tall grass. The syllables of the two names do not interrupt their games, old games, with a cast of ghosts. Maro, Sona, children, come home. Not that games stay the same, not that anything can last, only the syllables of their names, which no one answers to or claims. Children turn invisible at dusk. Maro and Sona do not come home. Children at twilight blend with the rain, but against the coming night, their names form the syllables that bless the dark. Maro, Sona, come home. This one is called Daughter. I was the child who swallowed whole the sight of showmen eating fire, flying rabbits on piano wire, every happy ending told, sure that straw could spin to gold. I grew older, gold spun back to straw. I learned miracles could lie only in the beholder's eye. Stayed jaded until the day I saw 2 eyes fill with my old awe. When my sister was little, she drew a series of caricatures of our mother titled, "Who Are You?" There was the angelic mother, there was the party-going, driving her Porsche, and there was the mad woman typing in a frenzy with 1 foot on a small child under her desk. The next poem was inspired by a kinder portrait. Angel in Somerville. Once Sona gave me an angel, or should I say a drawing of one, sprinkling stars like snow, inscribing it, Diana scattering light. Not mother, not mommy, not mom, she used my name. I taped it to the door of her old room, and there it stayed until it came to life today. Walking in Somerville, I saw a woman in an empty parking lot, scattering crumbs, St. Francis style, to swarming pigeons at her feet. Sona's angel, strewing stars, chatting as regent, angel, queen, bag lady no more, but mother, feeding her children, dispensing grace. We all die, we leave this world, but poets leave their words. Diana, my mother, left her finely honed poems. Through them, we can still see with her eyes. This last poem I'm reading is called Inside Green Eyes, Black Eyes. Inside my eye is another eye, looking out, seeing your eye, looking in. Inside my voice that speaks with spongy, soft verbs is another voice that shouts, Hayastan, Hayastan. Inside my song is another song whose words I never learned. I sing, I sang, the song inside is never done.
Thank you. Summer Street, Worcester. I love this poem. Again, it features a woman looking back in time, this time to her childhood, and finding herself walking between worlds and languages, remembering and forgetting. In this piece of remembrance, Diana reminds us of the multifold importance of poetry, to be the mouth that names the world, the body that keeps its story, and the hand that very often will grab us and lift us upwards toward the transcendent. Summer Street, Worcester. 1, 2, or 3. I can walk, run, but don't know the word for balloons. There they are. A big bunch tied with string to the head harness of the Iceman's horse. I am standing with other children in front of the brick apartment building on Summer Street, where the Iceman in a black leather apron cuts ice he will deliver. The children are all shouting in English, asking for the balloons. Balloons! That's what they are. Red, yellow, blue, green balloons tied to the horse I call tsi in Armenian. As an Armenian kid, I know it's not nice to ask for anything, no matter how much you want it, because your grandmother can read minds and will give it to you anyway. The Iceman walks toward the horse to untie the balloons, and the children jump up and down, shouting louder. I watch, wordless, as he takes them all down and hands them to me. All of them. Too surprised to say anything to either the man or the children who claw at me, I run down Summer Street with the balloons floating above me. The children are chasing after me. I can't remember more. Not the children stripping away the balloons. Not the little girl who ran. No. In my mind's eye, the balloons hoist her up, and she floats away.
Diana did Hovanessian. This is for Zarif, who used to draw in the mud of the water bank with a stick and weave marvelous stories for her little boy in a village called Tadem, who used to decorate the tops of pastry with cutouts of fantastic figures. This is for Zarif, who did needlework passably well and figures faster than any man. This is for Zarif, who prayed with 2 hands and who wrote to her son that although she could not watch him while he was away at school, she knew he would want to be like the other good men in his family who did not smoke. This is for that simple woman who did not teach her son to be a revolutionary, but when revolution came, hid a gun for him in the garden against bad days. This is for Zarif, whom the Turks beat, asking the whereabouts of that son. For Zarif, who said over and over again, I do not know, although she did. This is for Zarif, whose arm was smashed and made raw, then broken to pieces, then cut off, while she repeated when she waked, she did not know. This is for one-armed Zarif, who lived through hell, who lived to see her grandchildren in another world. This is for her, who once held my right hand in her left and never told me what I must do with mine.
Good afternoon. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here with you today as we celebrate the life and works of a person who made such an impact on the life of the Armenian American community, especially the cultural life of the community over so many decades. And obviously, one small indication of that is the large number of organizations, as Robert Mirak pointed out, who have co-sponsored the program today, the large number of people who are here today, I think who all have been touched by Diana personally or through her works over the years. The name of Diana first came to my attention when I saw her poetry printed in the Christian Science Monitor, which used to have a poetry column in which her works frequently appeared. So When I moved to Boston, I was thrilled to meet her in person, and I was very fortunate that as editor of the Armenian Mirror Spectator, I came in contact with her often. She would report to us about her various activities, and I was glad to do anything I could to help her in all her wonderful projects. She was always so generous with her time, always eager if you asked her to do something. One of the outstanding experiences in my life I will never forget was when William Medzorian came to town, and Diana invited me to her home to have lunch with him and with her. I will never forget that experience. And that was Diana, so open and so gracious. Later, I got to know her as a member of the Armenian International Women's Association. We gave her a Woman of Achievement Award in 1997, and in 2005, we published her very interesting book, The Other Voice, Armenian Women's Poetry Through the Ages, a book that was edited with her daughter, Maro, long distance, and that was a great experience. Like so many of you have said today, Diana was admirable in so many ways, in addition to her poetry, as such a kind and wonderful hostess. She was a friend to so many people. She was a woman of firm opinion, and you couldn't change her mind very easily, but she expressed them in such a nice way. You could always discuss things with her, and I think everybody respected, even if you didn't agree, you couldn't help but respect her for who she was. Her loss is a tremendous one for all of us. But the one consolation we have is that she left us so many wonderful works that will live on forever. And so we live with that wonderful legacy. This part of the program is for you who would like to share memories of Diana. First of all, Ara had a couple of announcements he wanted to make. First of all, I want to point out that we have received several messages from people who wanted to be with us today. Some of them are printed in the book. And I did want to point out that on page 3, in case you don't read Armenian, that's a message from His Holiness Aram, the Catholicos of Galicia. And we have also a message printed in Armenia from the Board of the Writers' Union of Armenia, which was whose president was always one of her great fans. In addition, we received some other messages that were too late to print in the book. One was from the Ministry of Diaspora of the Republic of Armenia, and the other was from the Central Executive of the Hovanessian Armenian Educational and Cultural Society. And to start off this part of the program, I'd just like to quote briefly from a message we received from another person who couldn't be here. This is from Nancy Melnyczuk, who is the associate editor of the Lyrics, which describes itself as the oldest magazine in North America in continuous publication devoted to traditional poetry. She expressed her regret that she couldn't be with us today because she lives in Milan. But she writes, Diana was a very special person and friend. We met at a flamenco dance class in Cambridge in the 70s, and she asked me to give her private flamenco lessons in her home. So like Diana, isn't it? Diana became a treasured friend when the Lyric began to publish her poetry in the 80s, and her poems danced across our pages for a quarter of a century. I am honored to have known her and have shared intense feelings of inner passion and love of movement with her. Diana, in her own words, said poetry was dancing with words, and truly everything about Diana was in movement, from her beautiful, sparkling eyes to the intensity of her poetry. May she rest in peace. Nancy sent along 4 of Diana's poems that were published in the Lyric to be read, and we obviously don't have time to read 4 poems, but I will read one of them. And this one is called Armenian Obsidian. Some called us rock, volcanic glass, or devil's fingernails that claw their way out of the past, in arrowheads that now reclaim the old bows our ancestors aimed at mountain slopes in search of game. Others say they're mirrored arcs, curving without cleavage, dark, after years of reflecting back invaders whose hearts were black. They are from lost times and tides, pieces of night sky solidified, needing no enameled glaze. They burn with their inner blaze. So, we now are coming to the end of the program. I do invite any of you who would like to say a few words to come up to the podium. I ask only that you be brief, because we do want to end the program and have a reception. So, maybe everything's been said already. Oh, there's one. Personally, I don't want to touch it. Oh. I can, oh.
I don't. Just a few words here, because Diana touched all our lives, and I'd known her for many, many years. You know, she was very intensely Armenian. But what I also saw in her was a woman who was very open to the world, the larger world. So that combination of intense Armenian and a cosmopolitan spirit really spoke to me. You know, I came from a part of Nigeria where I was born. The Igbos also suffered a lot. And I've talked with Peter Belekian over a number of times about this experience, because we know some common friends. I'm very much in touch with him too. And the only thing I want to say, because the time is running short, that at some point I began calling Diana Anahid. Anahid. And she was very alert. Oh, that was the name of my mother, or perhaps it was the name of the grandmother. This music of the names of the tribes of the world, the welcoming ones, the ones that gave us anchor, on whose shoulders Diana stands. So thank you, Diana. Thank you, poetry. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to New England Poetry Club, the people who have put this thing together. And thank you too. Anahid. It's okay.
First of all, I want to apologize for not having gotten here earlier. It's Sunday buses, and one of them never showed up. I love Diana. I knew her for what seems like forever, but wasn't. And I just am so glad to see everybody. And I'm sorry that I didn't get to meet a lot of you whom I don't meet. My name is Ellen Sorrow, and I'm a member of the New England Poetry Club since I got to Cambridge. And I am very grateful to Diana for all the things that I learned from her. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, we are having a reception, so you will have time to talk to some of us. You want to tell us who you are?
My name is Anthony Pahigian. I'm Diana's nephew. And so I just wanted to say one quick story. And I think I have to thank Ani Arakelian for reading the poem about Ararat, because as someone who spent a lot of time in the mountains, when I've always had either a picture or something of Ararat on a wall near me or in my home. And I didn't know when I'd get to see Ararat, but when she was given an award, when Diana was given an award by the Minister of Culture in Armenia, she more or less convoked the family, so Maro was there. Many of her family came, and Diana's sister, who's sitting in the back there, Helen Pahigian, was told me, come on, this is your best chance. So we went, and she was so busy, and there were so many poets and writers and everybody that wanted her time. But she asked me, what do you want to do while you're here? And I said, I want to see Ararat. So she took time, she gathered up a busload of writers, and we headed down, climbed up the stairs of a monastery, and got a view from there of Ararat. And that's a treasure that I always hold very close. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tommaso Leary. I had written a very brief poem of tribute to my old friend Diana, and I thought if this wasn't the place to say it, I might never, but I will. That's called Diana. Diana moved with irony and grace between the dream realm and the common world. She had a lively eye for the absurd. She told me once a bird had tried her window for clear passage. Poor thing, must have missed advanced training, is what she said. Another time, she saw a man emerging from a manhole, waving a rubber boot and shouting curses at another man who stood there on the surface. I've no idea, she said, but to rise from a hole, angrily waving a muddy boot, must have some deep significance. She sometimes stood beside herself and offered the option of one way or the other, to do a thing she'd sooner done her own way. She could raise hell, of course. Diana could. If thorny matters pressed her to pipe up. But love outspeaks her piquant presidential reign of many years of the glorious society that needs no naming in a crowd like this. She was a lovely, loving lady of the arts. Our hearts go with her to the realm she walks.
Thank you. And you leave us a copy of that, I hope. Leave us a copy of that, I hope, for the family. Thank you. Yes, Bob just reminded me that we do have, we didn't want to really have a book sale today, and yet we couldn't really have a program without some of Diana's books. So we do have a small selection of her books that are available for sale after the program. So I think we will now come to the one last segment, and then we'll have a reception. Thank you for your attention.
Yes,
And with that wonderful piece, we bring our program to a close. I want to thank everyone again, those who were made the journey here to the Cultural Foundation for the first time, those who have been here many times before, the presenters. And it's clear now that we can all feel comfortable that Diana lives, and it's a wonderful time for all of us here. Thank you again so much, and now we will have our reception. And I want to thank all those who contributed to not only the success of the program, but also the wealth of food and drink that we will have at the reception. We appreciate that very much. Thank you.
It's good to see you. How are you?